Thank you. Mr. Shulman, you've testified yesterday and today, and you said last spring you had a partial set of facts. You didn't have the full story, didn't fully understand what took place until you read the Inspector General's report. Is that accurate?
That sounds accurate.
All right. In the 2 years that this targeting was taking place, did any member of Congress contact you, excuse me, write you about this particular subject? Did you get any letters from Congress?
Yes.
All right. You know how many?
I do not.
We got some information from you all yesterday, a list of correspondence regarding 501c4s, and we counted them up. 132 different members of Congress contacted you over the appropriate time period. Did you read any of those letters?
The letters that I remember about this set of facts around
no, did you read any of them?
General started coming in February of 2012.
Well, this is from the IRS. We got 132 members of Congress contacted you about 501c4 status. You ever read newspaper articles about this issue and the time period that in question, Mr. Shulman?
To the best of my knowledge, yes.
You know how many news stories, hazard a guess, took place in the time period that we're focused on?
I wouldn't guess.
You have your staff, and in our office we have like a Google alert, and if my name comes up, they find out what the press is saying about me, and they let me know. Do you have that when you were at the IRS? You have like a Google alert when stories about the IRS or Doug Shulman come up? Did they let you know about those stories?
IRS has press clippings that I saw on a regular basis when I was there.
Would you hazard a guess about how many major news stories took place in this time period that is in question when the targeting was going on before you said you know?
No, I wouldn't.
42. We just did a quick search. 42 major news stories. So here's what everyone wants to know. You got 132 members of the United States Congress contacting you about this issue, 42 major news stories about this issue in the time period in question, and you never checked it out. You never researched it. I mean, are you sure you're being square with us today, Mr. Shulman?
I'm absolutely telling you the truth today.
Absolutely. Well, that's interesting because Mr. Lynch just cited your testimony from a year ago, and you used similar language. When in front of the Ways and Means Committee, can you give us assurances that the IRS is not targeting particular groups? Thanks for bringing this up because I think there's been a lot of press about this. There was, we found out, and a lot of moving information, so I appreciate the opportunity to clarify. First, let me start by saying, yes, I can give you assurances. I don't think you can say it any stronger. We pride ourselves on being a non-political, nonpartisan organization. And that's why people are wondering if you're being square with us today, because you said you could assure everyone, the American people in the Congress then, that nothing was going on. And the gentleman sitting beside you just issued a report last week that says what you told the Congress, what you told the American people a year ago, is absolutely wrong. And you're sure you're being square with us?
Excuse me?
You ever talked to anyone at the White House about this issue?
About this issue? Not that I remember.
You ever go to the White House? Time as Commissioner, did you ever go to the White House for meetings?
Yeah, I had a number of occasions to go to the White House.
How many times did you go to the White House?
Many times around budget and policy matters of tax and other things like that.
Got a number? Any idea?
I don't have a number.
We just looked at the White House log. Now, we couldn't get 2012, but in 2010 and 2011, 118 times you were at the White House. I mean, that's a lot. I bet these Democrat members of Congress and this administration haven't been there close to that many times. 118 times you were at the White House, 132 members of Congress contact you about this information, 42 major news stories about this very subject, and you told Congress a year ago, I can give you assurances, nothing is going on. Everything's wonderful. We're not targeting conservative groups. I mean, that's why the American people they're like, this is unbelievable. You sure you didn't talk to anyone at the White House about this issue, Mr. Shulman?
About singling out conservative groups for special scrutiny?
Well, that's what we're talking about, isn't it?
I'm absolutely sure I did not talk to anyone.
118 visits. It didn't come up in a casual conversation after 132 members of Congress contacted you about it. You sure you didn't bring it up with anybody at the White House?
Not to my memory, and it wouldn't be appropriate, and so I certainly believe I did not have any conversations.
Recognize the Mr. Lynch, I think, is, or excuse me, Mr. Conley is next up for questioning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Shulman, you were appointed by President Bush when?
I was nominated in 2007, confirmed in 2008.
And you served until?
November 2012.
So you served both in the last year of the Bush administration and through the first term of the Obama administration. Is that correct?
Correct.
There might be many reasons you would be at the White House. What would be some of the reasons you might be at the White House?
The Easter egg roll with my kids.
Well,
questions about the administrability of tax policy they were thinking of, our budget, us helping the Department of Education streamline application processes for financial aid.
I just want to be clear. You're very aware of the fact you're under oath today.
Yeah, very aware of that.
And your testimony, to be very clear, in response to Mr. Jordan's question, is that you've never had any conversation with respect to this subject, the subject of this hearing, with anybody at the White House, though you were at the White House 118 times. Is that?
Yeah, I mean, just so I'm clear, I have no memory. It would have been appropriate, would not have been appropriate to have a conversation with the White House, with anyone at the White House, about the subject of discriminating against conservative groups in any part of our operation. Well, I'm not familiar with that.
Straight from the White House log.
And I'm assuming that it counts when I go to OMB, which is the budget office for resources, et cetera.
No, it counts when you go to the White House. That's what it was. The times you've been at the White House, that's when it counts. So, who'd you meet with?
I met with a variety of people.
Is there somebody main? What was the main subject you talked about? You talk about 118 different things, or was there kind of some themes and focus?
The themes of things I would have talked to people at the White House about would have been our budget, would have been about tax policy, fiscal cliff, would have been about streamlining the FAFSA, the financial aid application, would have been when the tax for airport.
Did you talk about the implementation? Did you talk about the implementation of the Affordable Care Act?
Implementation of the Affordable Care Act would have been one of the themes, and there could have been more. I'm not prepared to give you an exhaustive.
Which one consumed the most of your time of those subjects you just listed?
Probably budget, general tax policy, and the Affordable Care Act.
So the Affordable Care Act was pretty important. You talked about it a lot.
The IRS has a major role in the money flows of
exactly,
the Affordable Care Act.
Exactly. And you started targeting the very groups who came into existence because they opposed what you were talking about in the White House, 118 different visits there. You started targeting them the very month that the Affordable Care Act became law. And yet you didn't have any conversations about the subject matter at hand today on those 118 visits, when many of those visits were about implementation of the Affordable Care Act, and the groups you were targeting were opposed to the Affordable Care Act. That's a question.
I'm sorry, what is the question?
You went to the White House 118 times. One of the key subjects you talked about was the implementation and the enforcement of the Affordable Care Act. Going on in your administration, at the time you're as commissioner, targeting of groups who came into existence because they opposed the Affordable Care Act, and you never brought it up in any of those conversations and all those visits to the White House when this was a major topic of conversation.
No, I did not.
Okay.
I
That's all I wanted to know.
operated as a nonpartisan, non-political person trying to implement the laws that were on the books. It would have been inappropriate, and nobody ever asked me, nor did I ever.
That would all be well and good, Mr. Shulman, but Mr. George issued a report that said just the opposite. That's the whole point. That's why we're here. And you said you could give assurances that it wasn't happening. Mr. George issued a report that said it was. And you were at the White House 118 times talking about the Affordable Care Act. And you never had any conversations about the targeting that was going on of groups who opposed the Affordable Care Act. And the American people are supposed to believe that. Gentleman from Utah.
How, these 118 visits to the White House, did you ever have a discussion about the 501c4s?
First of all, this is the first I've had an accounting of this.
Did you ever go to the White House?
I just don't accept the premise of there were 118 visits to the White House. It may or may not be true. So let me just stipulate for the record broadly, if there's more questions about that.
Did you ever talk about 501c4s at the White House? Yes or no?
Our either determinations process or
anything about 501c4s. Did you ever talk about the Citizens United case?
Not that I remember.
You never had a discussion.
Not that I remember.
No discussion about 501c4s.
Not that I remember.
It was a major thing. It is a big deal. You never had one conversation.
Not that I remember.
You said you first heard about this problem in spring of 2012, correct?
I heard that I first heard about the BOLO list in spring 2012.
When did you first hear that there was a concern about the targeting of based on political beliefs and political speech? When did you first hear that?
To the best of my recollection, was in the February-March timeframe of 2012.
Okay,
and then,
but
there were also...
No, you can't. On June 3rd, 2011, the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, Dave Camp, sent you a letter. June of 2011. Second paragraph. Now, without no warning, the IRS appears to have selectively targeted certain taxpayers who are engaged in political speech. And he goes on. How is it that he, the chairman of Ways and Means, sends you, the head of the IRS, a letter like this, and you say you know nothing about it?
So that's where I was going to go. This is a very separate matter.
No, you weren't.
This is a very separate matter. That's a gift tax matter that I'm aware of.
This is exactly about political speech, and it continues to go on. Then you hear from Charles Bustani, who sends a letter on October 6th requesting information about the tax-exempt sector. How is it that it takes you so long and that you say you don't know this? And Mr. Wolin, you said you took immediate action. What happens with all of these letters? Mr. Shulman, when you get a letter from a member of Congress, who else is copied on that? Who else do you give it to? You're not the only one that sees this letter.
Who do I give it to? Letters usually, as far as I know the process, go into our Congressional Affairs Office. They get farmed out to the appropriate staff who are subject matter experts to try to get the best answer. And
does Mr. Wolin get copied on these?
Not that I'm aware of.
Does anybody at the Treasury Department get these outside the IRS?
I really don't know.
Does anybody get these letters at the White House?
At the White House?
At the White House.
Not that I'm aware of.
So when you get a letter from the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, or the chairman of this committee, chairman of any, you're telling me that you have no idea where it goes and what happens to it.
To the best of my knowledge, it goes into our Congressional Affairs shop. Someone in the organization answers it.
And who do they?
Comes up to, if it's for my signature, the return, that would come up to me for review most of the time. Let me also just note, of all the letters people are talking about, there's a lot of individual constituent mail that comes into the IRS.
So you get a lot of mail.
Much of which I don't see.
But do you see all the letters from members of Congress?
To the best of my knowledge, I do, the ones to me.
So you got 132 members of Congress. The House.
Let me actually repeat. If it's something that someone else is going to take care of, I might not have seen it. But the ones you're referring to, Mr. Bustani's, Mr. Camp's.
Mr. Hatch, the 12 senators, did you see that letter?
Yes.
When he says this was a lie by omission, how do you respond to that?
My belief is that, well, first of all, the letter in question was not under my signature. And second,
he's made a fairly serious charge. I want to know what you think of this idea of lie by omission.
I disagree with it.
And that will have to conclude. We now go to the gentleman.